They walk among us, the hollow one, men who speak with conviction yet crumble at the first whisper of doubt. You've seen them, maybe even trusted them. They puff their chests, rehearse confidence, wear strength like an expensive cologne, but underneath there's nothing. No foundation, no spine, just a desperate need to be seen as powerful. Here's the thing, real strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to prove. It doesn't chase validation or approval. But the weak man can't survive without it. He's a mirror that only exists when others reflect back his image. Take that reflection away, and he disappears. Niccolo Machiavelli, a man both feared and misunderstood, understood this better than anyone. He saw that human nature is a battlefield of appearances, masks, and instinct. And he knew that if you want to identify weakness in men, you must look past their words and watch the fractures in their behavior, the tiny cracks that betray the fear they try so hard to hide. Because weakness doesn't scream, it leks. It seeps through tone, through hesitation, through the subtle tremor in the eyes when pride is threatened. And once you learn to see it, you'll never unsee it again. The first behavior, and perhaps the most revealing, is the hunger for validation disguised as confidence. The weak man doesn't build self-worth from within. He borrows it from attention. Every move he makes, every story he tells, every boast, it's bait. A silent plea, please believe I matter. Watch him when no one's watching, that's where the truth lives. He grows smaller in silence. He needs the echo of admiration to remind him he exists. Machiavelli wrote that men are driven by two things, fear and ambition. The weak man's ambition is hollow, it's not to achieve, but to be seen achieving. He confuses recognition for respect, applause for worth. He'll spend hours crafting a mask that earns praise but never builds character. And what's dangerous is that this man often looks confident. His voice is loud, his gestures bold, but it's all theater, a desperate performance for an imaginary audience. You'll notice it when he interrupts others to reclaim the spotlight, when he brags before he's earned it, when he needs his victories to be seen, not felt. Here's the quiet truth Machiavelli understood. The man who truly possesses power doesn't announce it because his sense of self is unshakable. You can't take from him what you didn't give. The weak man, on the other hand, is always negotiating his worth with the world. And when that worth isn't confirmed, he spirals. You'll see it in how he reacts to rejection, not with grace, but with panic. He interprets indifference as an attack, silence as humiliation, criticism as betrayal, because without validation, he's exposed, naked before his own insecurity. You want to know how to test a man's strength? Starve him of approval, remove the audience. See how long he lasts when no one's clapping. The strong man grows sharper in solitude. The weak one decays in it. But there's another behavior Machiavelli noted, one even subtler, more poisonous. The avoidance of discomfort disguised as intelligent. The weak man will call himself strategic, peaceful, or above the drama, but what he really means is afraid. He avoids conflict not out of wisdom, but because he's terrified of confrontation. He worships comfort and hides behind intellect to excuse his cowardice. You'll recognize this man by his language, soft, polished, overly careful. He speaks as if every word must be sterilized before it leaves his mouth. He calls it diplomacy. Machiavelli would call it impotence, because the truth is, power demands discomfort. Leadership demands confrontation. The ability to face tension without flinching is what separates the grounded from the fragile. The weak man wants harmony at any cost, even if that cost is self-respect. He would rather be liked than right. He would rather stay silent than risk disapproval. Watch him when someone crosses a line. Every moment he avoids tension, he trades a piece of his dignity for temporary comfort. And soon, there's nothing left to protect. Machiavelli warned rulers that mercy, when misplaced, becomes cruelty. In other words, being too soft eventually destroys not only you but those who depend on you. The weak man doesn't understand this. He confuses being agreeable with being good. But goodness without backbone is just weakness wearing virtue as a mask. He will fold under pressure, not because he lacks intellect, but because he cannot endure discomfort. His mind rationalizes retreat. His ego calls it strategy. But deep down, he knows he ran, and that knowledge festers. Here's what Machiavelli would say: the man who cannot face tension will never command respect. People don't follow the agreeable, they follow the grounded, the one who can walk through fire without losing composure. Because power, real power, is calm under chaos. And that brings us to the third behavior, the one that reveals everything: the need to dominate rather than to control oneself. The weak man mistakes aggression for power. He confuses control over others with control over himself. You'll see him in every argument that turns personal, every relationship where dominance replaces understanding. He needs to win not because the truth matters, but because losing feels like death. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved, but what most men forget is why he said it. He wasn't glorifying cruelty. He was pointing out that fear, unlike love, doesn't rely on the other person's feelings. It's stable, predictable, and that's what the weak man craves: stability. But instead of earning respect through discipline, he takes the shortcut: intimidation. It's fragile power built on sand. He raises his voice, not because he's strong, but because silence exposes him. He asserts control externally because he has none internally. And here's the irony: the more he tries to dominate others, the more he becomes enslaved by his own insecurity. Every challenge becomes a threat, every disagreement a wound to his ego. He becomes addicted to control because without it, he feels worthless. The strong man, on the other hand, understands that self-control is the highest form of dominance. He doesn't need to prove he's in charge. His composure does it for him. He can listen without being diminished, lead without shouting, lose without crumbling. Machiavelli's insight was brutal but honest. Men who cannot govern themselves will always seek to govern others, because control to them is not about leadership. It's therapy for fear. If you want to know a man's strength, don't watch him when he's winning. Watch him when he's challenged, disrespected, or ignored. Does he stay centered, or does he lash out? The weak man collapses under emotional weight. The strong one absorbs it, transforms it into focus. And here's the quiet paradox: the more inner control you develop, the less you need outer control. You stop chasing submission and start commanding respect, silently, effortlessly. Because true authority doesn't come from domination. It comes from presence, from the unshakable calm that tells the world, "I am not moved by your chaos." That's the difference Machiavelli saw between rulers and impostors. One builds from the inside out. The other builds castles made of sand, impressive until the tide arrives. But the tragedy of weak men isn't that they fail, it's that they live pretending they haven't. They construct illusions so carefully that even they start to believe them. They create a persona that feels solid, but if you look closely, it's paper-thin, held together by excuses, pride, and denial. And the more fragile their sense of self becomes, the louder they project the opposite. Machiavelli understood this paradox centuries ago. That insecurity disguised as confidence is the most dangerous weakness of all, because it blinds a man to his own decay. When you can't admit your weakness, you can't correct it. You just keep polishing the mask. And that's what most people don't see. Weakness isn't just a lack of strength, it's a refusal to face truth. It's not physical, it's psychological. He fears introspection more than failure, because introspection threatens his illusion, and illusion is all he has. You can see this sickness everywhere: in relationships, in workplaces, in politics. Men so desperate to appear strong that they become tyrants over the people who care about them most. They confuse fear with respect, obedience with loyalty. But here's the thing: you can scare people into silence, not into devotion. And silence, when rooted in fear, always turns into resentment. Machiavelli knew this. He saw how rulers who led by cruelty alone eventually fell, not because their enemies were stronger, but because their people stopped believing in them. Fear can keep a man in line, but it cannot keep him loyal. Real power doesn't demand obedience, it earns it. That's the mark of inner strength, the ability to command without coercion, to move others not through threats, but through certainty, through that quiet gravity that only self-disciplined men carry. Because here's the truth: a man who has mastered himself doesn't need to prove anything. His actions speak with a kind of stillness that unsettles the ungrounded. He doesn't compete for attention. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't need to dominate anyone because his kingdom is internal. And that's what weak men will never understand. The greatest form of control is not over others, but over the chaos inside your own mind. Machiavelli's writings were never just about politics, they were about psychology. He studied how people act when power enters the room, and he saw something timeless. Most men collapse when power tempts them. They become reckless, indulgent, self-destructive. Why? Because they confuse having power with being powerful. You can hand a weak man a crown and he'll still behave like a slave to his impulses, his ego, his insecurities. Give him status and he'll use it to feed his hunger for validation. Give him money and he'll use it to fill the void of meaning. Give him attention and he'll drown in it. Because you can't empower a man who hasn't conquered himself. That's what Machiavelli meant by "a prince who depends on fortune is lost." fortune, luck, opportunity, privilege. It means nothing if the man inside the armor is hollow. The world gives him power, but his weakness eats it from within. So the question becomes, how do you identify these men before they infect your circle, your trust, your mission? You don't listen to their words, you observe their patterns. Watch how they respond to failure. Do they take responsibility or do they deflect? Watch how they react to success. Do they grow humble or arrogant? Watch what they do when no one is watching. That's where masks fall away. The weak man's mask always cracks under pressure. He'll betray himself in moments of chaos, because chaos doesn't give him time to rehearse his performance. His real nature leaks out in tone, in impatience, in how quickly he blames others when things fall apart. Machiavelli once wrote that men judge more by their eyes than their hands, that people believe what they see, not what they feel. But he also warned, the wise learn to see with their hands, to touch reality directly, to look past appearances. And when you start looking at behavior, not image, you begin to see how obvious weakness really is. You can sense it. It's in the posture that overcompensates, in the laugh that's too loud, in the opinion that changes to match whoever's in the room. It's in the constant need to be seen, to be praised, to be validated, as if silence itself were unbearable. Weak men fear silence because silence reveals them to themselves. That's why they chase noise, constant distraction, endless movement, stimulation. They cannot sit alone with their thoughts because their thoughts accuse them. Their mind becomes a courtroom, and their conscience is the judge. And yet, here's the cruel irony. The very discomfort they avoid is the doorway to strength. Machiavelli would say, if you want to build a fortress, first walk into the wilderness. Meaning, face what you fear. The men who avoid pain become prisoners of it. The men who face pain become masters of it. Every powerful man you've ever admired has made peace with discomfort. He's been betrayed, humiliated, doubted, but he used each wound as information. He studied his pain like a strategist studies the enemy. He turned suffering into wisdom. Weak men do the opposite. They hide from their pain and then complain that life is unfair. They want strength without struggle, respect without responsibility, reward without risk. They want to be lions without the hunt. Machiavelli would laugh at that, not out of cruelty, but recognition, because he knew that the human mind is built for struggle. Comfort rots character. Ease dulls instinct. Every time you avoid discomfort, you trade growth for illusion. And here's what this really means: strength is not something you show. It's something you become when no one's watching. It's a quiet process of stripping away lies. The strong man doesn't posture. He doesn't perform. He observes, he adapts, he refines. His ego is not a weapon, it's a tool. And when the world attacks him, he doesn't collapse into self-pity. He simply recalibrates, because he understands what most men never will. Life is not about avoiding pain, but becoming precise through it. You'll notice something else: the strong man is rarely loud. Not because he's timid, but because he has nothing to prove. His silence has weight. His words are measured, not because he fears being wrong, but because he values truth over image. Machiavelli once said that the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. He wasn't endorsing deceit, he was explaining adaptability. The strong man doesn't cling to old versions of himself, he evolves. The weak man, meanwhile, stays loyal to his delusion. He would rather live as a lie than die to his ego. That's why weak men stagnate. They repeat the same patterns, the same excuses, the same cycles, because they'd rather be consistent with their weakness than confront it. Change terrifies them. Growth feels like death. And so they live small, endlessly negotiating with fear, justifying mediocrity, envying the strong while pretending not to care. But envy is just admiration poisoned by resentment. And if you look closely, you'll see it in their eyes, that flicker of hatred reserved for anyone who embodies what they secretly wish they were. That's how you identify the weak. They're offended by strength. The presence of a grounded, disciplined man makes them restless. They'll call him arrogant, cold, ruthless, anything to disguise the discomfort his presence creates in them. But what they're really seeing is a mirror. Because deep down, every weak man knows what he could have been if he had the courage to face himself. Machiavelli saw this dynamic everywhere, in courts, in politics, in families. The strong rarely need to attack the weak. The weak destroy themselves trying to attack the strong, because the weak man's fight is never about justice or truth. It's about revenge against the reminder of his own failure. That's why weak men gossip. That's why they slander. That's why they sabotage, not because they're strategic, but because it's the only way they can feel powerful without actually becoming powerful. Destruction is easier than discipline, but the man who's truly mastered himself doesn't retaliate. He doesn't waste his energy correcting the opinions of small men, because he knows that attention is currency and the weak are always broke. He simply moves in silence, builds quietly, wins quietly, because real strength isn't proven in confrontation, it's revealed through composure. Machiavelli understood, you can't expose a weak man by arguing with him. You expose him by outlasting him. His weakness reveals itself over time through inconsistency, emotion, instability. The strong man endures, the weak one exhausts himself. And that's the ultimate identification tactic, patience. Time unmasks everyone, because here's what Machiavelli knew better than almost anyone: masks always decay. Time corrodes Watch a weak man over time and you'll see his layers peel off one by one. First goes the charm, the exaggerated warmth he uses to disarm others. Then the rationalizations start, excuses for why things aren't fair, why people don't appreciate. Soon the bitterness sets in. The world becomes his enemy. And finally, what's left is the truth he's run from all along. He's not a victim of the world. He's a victim of himself. Machiavelli called this self-destruction through cowardice. Because every time a man chooses comfort over courage, he builds his own cage. Every time he avoids accountability, he weakens his ability to change. And by the time life finally demands strength from him, it's too late. His will has atrophied. His spirit's gone soft. But here's the thing, you can always spot the moment where the weak man breaks. It's when life finally stops bending for him, when the mask can't save him anymore. When he realizes that no amount of pretending, no amount of posturing can protect him from consequence. You can see it in his eyes, the quiet panic of a man realizing he never learned to stand alone. He spent years seeking approval, chasing comfort, dominating others, and now he's empty. Because every action he took was external. Nothing was built inside. Machiavelli believed that fortune favors the prepared mind, but the weak man never prepares, he reacts. He waits for luck, prays for ease, complains about difficulty. He lives passively, like a man waiting for someone to rescue him from himself. And that's why time exposes him, because time rewards those who adapt and punishes those who wait. The weak man hides behind excuses. I didn't have the chance, people don't get me, life's unfair. But life isn't unfair, it's indifferent. It doesn't care about fairness. It reveals who you are when comfort disappears. The strong man accepts that. He doesn't fight it. He understands that pain, betrayal, failure, these are not punishments. They're training. Every blow is instruction. Every fall is feedback. That's why the strong evolve, because they interpret struggle as information. The weak interpret it as injustice. Machiavelli said that a wise ruler must learn to act against mercy, against faith, against humanity when necessary. What he meant was simple. Survival often demands transformation. Not moral blindness, but moral flexibility. Weak men can't handle that. They cling to idealism not because they're noble, but because they're afraid to adapt. They want a world that bends to their emotions, but the world bends only to the discipline. And that's the unspoken secret behind power. It's not about cruelty, it's about control. Control of your reactions, control of your impulses, control of your narrative. Weak men let life happen to them. Strong men shape it, not by force, but by focus. You see, Machiavelli's entire philosophy can be distilled into one truth. Power belongs to those who see clearly. Not to those who are kind or brutal or clever, but to those who can look at reality without flinching. Because clarity is terrifying. It strips away illusion. It forces you to face exactly what you are, what you fear, what you avoid. Weak men live in distortion. They need lies to survive, lies about who they are, what they deserve, why they fail. But the strong strip away everything false, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because they know that clarity, though brutal, is the only path to freedom. Think about it, how many people live as prisoners of illusion, pretending to be happy, pretending to be confident, pretending to be in control, but deep down they're terrified of silence, because silence brings truth, and truth demands change. The weak man will do anything to avoid that moment. He'll fill his life with noise, gossip, distraction, ambition, anything to drown out the voice that asks the only question that matters. Who are you when everything is stripped away? That question is the dividing line between strength and weakness. Because the strong man doesn't fear the answer, he seeks it. He wants to know himself, all of himself. The good, the dark, the contradiction. He doesn't run from his shadow, he studies it. That's why his strength feels different, grounded, not inflated. Machiavelli understood that self-knowledge is a weapon. To know your nature is to know how you'll react under pressure, and therefore how to master it. The weak man never gets that far. He's too busy maintaining his image. But image doesn't help you when the walls close in. And the walls always close in, because life will test you not once, not twice, but endlessly. It will strip away everything external, your reputation, your support, your comfort, until only one thing remains, your capacity to endure. And in that silence, the weak crumble, the strong transform. This is the essence of Machiavelli's identification tactic. He didn't just observe weakness, he provoked it. He knew that pressure reveals character. He'd test people with silence, uncertainty, contradiction, just to see what surfaced. The insecure would fidget, over-explain, collapse into defensiveness. The grounded would remain still, observant, unmoved. You can use the same tactic today. To know who you're dealing with, create uncertainty calmly. Disagree gently and watch their reaction. Question their assumptions, withdraw validation, see who panics and who stays centered. Weakness always flinches first, because confidence born from ego dies in silence. Only conviction born from truth survives it. But here's the deeper revelation. This isn't just about identifying weak men. It's about purging the weakness within yourself. Because all of us carry fragments of these behavior, the hunger for validation, the avoidance of discomfort, the impulse to control. They're not flaws to hate, they're signals to evolve. Machiavelli would tell you that the first step to strength is brutal self-awareness. Look inward without mercy. Identify the parts of you that flinch, that seek comfort, that crave applause, and burn them out with discipline. Because you can't conquer the world if you're still ruled by your insecurities. Weakness feeds on denial. Strength grows from honesty. And once you've faced yourself, really faced yourself, no one can use your flaws against you. The opinions of others lose their grip. Rejection stops feeling like death. Solitude becomes sanctuary, not punishment. You stop chasing approval because you no longer need proof that you exist. You become your own validation. That's what real strength feels like: quiet, steady, and terrifying to those who fake it. Machiavelli wrote, "A wise man should never be ashamed to learn." Meaning, the moment you stop evolving, you start decaying. The weak man hides behind pride. The strong one remains a student forever. He understands that the world is not a war to win, but a mirror to read. Every interaction, every betrayal sharpens, every loss purifies. And that's the transformation: when you stop fearing pain and start extracting meaning from it. That's when life stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like design. You begin to realize people do betray you, they reveal themselves. Failure doesn't destroy you, it refines you. Loneliness doesn't punish you, it prepares you. Every hardship becomes data, intelligence about who you are and who you must become. The weak man sees tragedy. The strong man sees training. And that's how Machiavelli himself survived, not through brute force, but through perception. He understood that the world is a chessboard, and every move, yours or others, exposes something. Strength isn't found in domination or fear. It's found in understanding what drives people and refusing to be driven by the same illusion. When you reach that level of clarity, everything changes. You stop reacting to life. You start directing it. You stop needing control because you realize the ultimate control is over your perception. That's when you become untouchable. Because the man who is ruled by nothing, not fear, not praise, not desire, cannot be manipulated. And that's what Machiavelli was trying to teach all along. Power is not about cruelty. It's about composure, about being the calmest mind in the storm. Because chaos favors the prepared, and the prepared are always few. But here's the truth that breaks men and builds gods. Strength is not something you're born